everybody, and welcome back to the Building Excellence Podcast. I'm hoping I'm talking to people who've already seen an episode or two of this phenomenal series we have going, and that is how to be unsuccessful. If this is your first time tuning in to our podcast, this Building Excellence Podcast is put on by just a bunch of individuals who are just passionate about helping other people build excellence in some area of their life. And so today is a phenomenal day. So this is something that we do at the end of any season that we're doing. We just love to tap into wisdom or wise counsel. The Bible teaches us this. Walk with the wise and you'll grow wise. And so we have this part of our podcast called Candid Wisdom, okay? Hopefully you love that name. It took us a little bit to figure out what we wanted to call it, because we definitely wanted wisdom in there, because it's people who have life experiences that we truly believe is going to help not only us, but other people, anybody that tunes into this podcast. But also, we want to be candid. We want to be able to ask questions and talk about whatever, So Candid Wisdom is the name of it. So hopefully y'all are ready to dive in. If you haven't taken a look or listened to any of the previous podcasts in regard to how to be unsuccessful, I truly encourage you to go do that. There's been some phenomenal nuggets that have been laid on our hearts to share. But today, let me introduce you to a good friend of mine that is joining us for the first Candid Wisdom part of how to be unsuccessful. I'm not going to introduce him. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. Please tell our entire audience who you are and a little bit about yourself in about a minute or so.
Man, I'm happy to. I'm really grateful to be here, Dwayne. My name is Ben Winters. I own a media company. It's called Circle House Media here in Oklahoma City.
Phenomenal company.
Oh, thanks, man. I love specializing in people and places and things. So there's your there's your idea there. But people are my favorite. People can smile back. Things don't really do that. So I really enjoy taking pictures of people. That's the majority of my work, is behind a camera, pushing the button, getting photos, and just telling stories like that. So I've been doing this now for professionally for about 14 years.
Wow.
Kind of going on 15. 2010 was sort of the early start of it. And God's just blessed so much of what I do to give me something that I love to do, and a challenge to be like, okay, you love to do this, now support your family with it. Like, wow.
I mean, 15 years. Oh, so hopefully you don't mind me asking, how old are you, bro?
I'm 36.
36. So
Now, early time, it wasn't full time. I wasn't doing that full time.
No, but still doing anything 15 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And so I just had to ask him his age for people who are looking right now like, he seems awfully young to be doing something for 15 years.
Grew a beard just to support that.
That's pretty incredible, man. It really is incredible. So
Thanks.
If somebody did want to look at your work or to get more information about your company, how do they do that?
Yeah, the best place to go is my website, circlehouse.media.
Okay.
That's where I like to kind of keep the majority of everything there. If you're on Instagram, Circle House Media is a good place to kind of see some stuff. I don't post a lot just because I find myself busy enough that I would prefer to draw people to my website. But that's the best place to kind of see what I'm up to.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you this. I completely vouch for him. Obviously, we're doing the Candid Wisdom podcast with him. So if you haven't had a phenomenal experience in somebody taking pictures of you, literally bringing the best out of you, I'm telling you, this is somebody you should totally look into. All right, you're going to have fun while you do it too. And I almost let the cat out of the bag because he is married. So please tell us about that, because his wife is, I'm going to say, is even. She's going to make you feel even better about yourself than he does. He does a pretty good job as well. So please tell us about your marriage. How long have you been married?
Absolutely. So Ashlyn and I got married in 2015. And some of that plays into our story. Actually, that year plays into our story for what we're talking about today. But we got married in 2015, and we've lived here in Oklahoma City. She's from all over Oklahoma, all the different places. Her family kind of moved around a bunch. I was right here, born and raised, right in Oklahoma City. And so it's just been a sweet thing as we've kind of journeyed through church life together, through just ministries together in different ways. And so she's a potter. So we have this kind of creative bent in our house. I will say one thing that's fun. So I can't do anything with pottery, and she would freely admit she doesn't have an eye for photography. But we do have like a similar design aesthetic. So like our house, when you walk in, people will be like, wow, your house is great. And we're both like, thanks. You know, that was something we found. We talked about that this weekend with a family that was there, and they're like, wow, we really like the way your house looks. And we're like, thanks. We both designed it. It's just the way that all these things come together is really funny to see that.
That is cool. That is cool. Well, all right. Well, let's go and dive into this thing.
Please.
So this topic is an unconventional topic. We hear a lot of times people talk about how to be successful. We wanted to put a spin on it to hopefully generate some new thoughts, some new ideas, or maybe some old thoughts that just land on fresh soil. And that is how to be unsuccessful. And so, man, you are an entrepreneur, running a business. It's 15 years. You're married. I just want to ask this question. I want to begin with how can you be unsuccessful in being an entrepreneur in your field?
And this question has had me running all over the place mentally. But the first story that came to mind was right back when I met Ashlyn. So we met in 2014, and at that time I was working full-time and taking pictures almost full-time, kind of my own business as well as working for another company, and I had stacked myself so thick with all sorts of sessions all throughout the year that I turned to the company that I was working at. I went to my manager and I said, hey, I like working here. This is great. And it actually was really fun. It was an IT job that I just enjoyed. And it had great hours, by the way. I was working for a school district. Okay. Wonderful hours, because you get like the summers are real chill, and you get, there's a lot of break time. But I was working IT for them, and I just came to my boss and I said, hey, I feel like I'm staring down a double barrel shotgun. Like one barrel is like my consistent work here, which is great, a steady paycheck. The other barrel though was like, I am stacked so full. I was shooting a ton of weddings weddings all the time. And that was the majority of my work, was like wedding work and engagements and, family portraits and things like that. It's since then shifted. But at that time I was telling him, I was like, I feel like I'm staring down a double barrel, and it was stressing me out. And I was like, this isn't going to work. And I met Ashlyn in that same season. And so in my mind, I was like, well, this will be great. And we decided fairly early on that we wanted to get married. And over the course of that year of our kind of trying to figure that out, dating, and then we got engaged, whatnot. I said, hey, I need to quit this job and go full time. And that was 2014 into early 2015. And the problem is, I thought, man, this is going great. Like, I'm making money, and this will be great income. But I kind of describe it as like a horse wearing blinders. Like, all I could see was what was on my calendar for the next 2 or 3 months. Okay. And that was it. I was just staring down. And as a young starting-ish entrepreneur, that's pretty normal, I think, that we just kind of look right at what's right in front of us and say, wow, I'm making good money over the next, 25 days or 40 days at the most or whatever. I hadn't learned to look beyond that. I hadn't learned to really say, hey, what's coming up in 3 months? This is July. What's normal, in September, October for my, for what I do? What's normal? And I just hadn't really put those things down on paper yet. Right. And so I quit my job, and I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going full time. My manager was like, okay, bye, I guess. And yeah, I would take that back the way I did. I would take that back, but that's another story. We were, I'm in the throes of engagement. This is fantastic. We're getting married soon, and so much fun. And then I look up after that busy season passed, and I was like, oh, I'm not booked for anything. I don't have anything on the calendar anywhere like what I did a year ago, and so it was this accident of only sort of like having the blinders for the next 3 to 5 months or less. It was really even less than that. And in my mind, I was like, I'm making all the money I need. And yet the reality was like, you are for the next, quarter. And that's it. So what about a year from now? And I just no one had ever spoken that into me, or I didn't have the foresight to even think further than, the reach of my arm, so to speak. And that crippled us. Like, we went into marriage and I was like, hey, I got to get a job now. Cause like, I was like, I forgot all about, how to provide. And, my wife was gracious. She was a teacher at the time. She was like, hey, I'm holding down the fort on this. So go out and do what you need. So I ended up still working, but I hadn't scheduled myself out and booked enough shoots or whatever to kind of keep us afloat, on my own. And so I was like, okay, great. Well, I ended up getting a part-time job somewhere else, and that kind of developed into full-time. And so that continued this sort of cycle of like, all right, now I'm still working full-time and trying to run my business full-time, and now with a wife, and and so that was the struggle. I just remember looking back at that time and being like, I felt foolish. I felt like, man, I don't know how to think ahead. I don't know how to think ahead. I don't know how to think a year out. And I'm not saying I know how to now, but what I've learned over the years is what makes me more successful now is I track what I do, so that I can say, okay, this time last year, what was I shooting? Or, next quarter, what was I shooting last year? And that's helped a lot.
Okay, so I'm going to try to repeat back what I think I just heard.
Please.
So
include everything.
I heard that. So you're saying if you want to be unsuccessful, don't think ahead.
Yeah.
Make decisions based off of what you see over the next few weeks, maybe even few months. And then one moment you'll realize that third or fourth month comes around, and all of a sudden, if you've quit your job, because you're going to go ahead and do this thing full time, you wake up and say, man, how am I going to eat?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you want to be unsuccessful, don't think ahead.
Yeah.
Make impulse decisions based on the moment, and put blinders on, and just say, you know what? I think I'm good. These 3 months look good. So for sure, the rest of the years will look good.
Yeah.
That was so helpful. So let me ask you this. So you said what you learned was to begin to think ahead, and you actually gave a best practice. Will you remind us of that best practice?
Yeah. So I just started. I called it my photography log, right?
Okay.
And so what I did, and I started actually out of necessity, because I began realizing, like, at one point I looked up, I was like, has that client paid me? And I was like, I don't remember. And so I just, out of necessity, I'm an Apple guy, so I opened Numbers, right? I created a spreadsheet in Numbers. Okay. And I'll sell you on Numbers over Excel any day, or Google Sheets, or whatever. I'll sell you on it, man. I'm a big fan of it. Anyway, I opened Numbers one day and I was just like, January 1st, did I do anything that day? No. Okay. January 2nd. And I just went down and I started creating a log. In essence, now all it is just accounting. But I had never experienced that before. And so I just started at zero. I was just like, okay, what did I do here? And in doing so, I gradually added column after column of like, okay, so this was the day of the shoot. Have I been paid for this? This is and then what that, and over the years now, I've added more and more data, and just sort of as like a happy, accident, so to speak. I've been collecting data now on my business for many years. And so what I can do is, through this big old spreadsheet, I just sort by like, hey, what did I do last year? How many headshot sessions did I do last year? How many, event sessions did I do last year? What weird ones did I shoot that I was not prepared for or ready for? And like a random one, I've been photographing airplanes, like for sale, like airplanes that are for sale, right? And it's not like this big, huge thing, but it's one of these fun, like, didn't see that one coming. Well, over the last year, when I've been shooting them, when did those typically fall? And now I can sort of prepare next year to be like, hey, let me sort of reach out a month or so in advance and check in with those brokers, never thought I'd be talking to airplane brokers, right? That's so weird. We just reach out a month ahead and be like, hey, and just we're noting that we're coming into a busy season for airplane sales. Even though I don't know anything about the industry, right? I think we're coming into a busy season of airplane sales, possibly. How's that looking? Just to kind of get my name back out there, and suddenly, 2025 or 2020, whatever the next year is, I'm at least on the radar. But I only do this because I look back and I say, oh, wow, August, September, October, great time of year for airplane sales. As far as I'm aware, right?
Wow.
But just because I've been photographing those during those times.
Got it. So what helped you plan ahead was looking at what you did in the past, and that put you in the ballpark, or maybe the zip code of, here are the things I should be focused on in this season. So October last year, I was doing this. Okay, so I need to go ahead and market to these people to see if I can go and do that again. Okay, that makes total sense.
So not thinking ahead on that, like I look up and it's October and I'm going, oh, that's right. They were like last year I was doing this. And at that point, it feels like it's almost too late to reach out. Or at least if I do reach out to those clients, it's like, hey, are things going? They're like, oh, we've already got that sold or booked or whatever. And I'm going, man, like I didn't think ahead. I didn't think ahead. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. This is definitely a growth area for me. But it's something that I've learned a lot of just because I've been keeping track of it all.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you learn, well, if I want to be unsuccessful, I don't do it. But if I want to be successful, I want to be booked and blessed.
I bet a good way to put this is like, if I want to be unsuccessful, just assume it's going to come, right? Well, I don't want to assume. And I think the Lord's taught me a lot on that too. Like as a Christian, I look at this and I just kind of go like, oh, it's going to be figured out. And yet, so clearly, just like we were talking about, is like wisdom teaches us that you don't just assume things. Like that's actually a foolish thing. Like, and you look around everywhere in our culture, and it's the same idea, right? Like people just assume I'm going to make money when I'm older. It's like, okay, well, how are you going to do that? And like, let's go about that with wisdom and with character. That's a big thing. Is how are you going to, if you make the money, how are you going to spend the money? How are you going to use that money? Is and that I think in turn kind of folds back on itself. So
wow, you're 100% right. There is this field of dreams kind of mindset when people start a business. If you build it, they will come.
Yes.
So speak to that, man. Does you build it, it will come? Is that a reality or?
Yeah, I guess yes and no. Here's what I can say. I opened a studio in 2022, and it was one of these things that we did it kind of out of this. I was doing everything out of my house, and you can't really invite someone. You can. I'll be honest. In my line of work, you can invite someone to get pictures anywhere. But I didn't want to do it in my house. I don't want to be like, hey, client, come to my house and let me take a picture. And that's dumb. So I was like, I really need a space for headshots that's consistent, that I don't have to keep booking somewhere else and all these things. I'd like to bring them in, keep my costs down, keep their costs down, bring them in and just do it right there. And so it was in some essence, like there's a big risk, right? I'm going to be spending money on a place that I don't know I will actually use as much as I can. Turns out it's been great. In many ways, like it's got me out of the house. That's actually been really good. That's a whole other thought, but that does not pertain to this conversation. If you build it, they will come. I built it, and I had to tell people about it, right? I had to be like, hey, here's my vision. Let me bring you in. Let me bring you in. Let me bring you in. Please come. And not everyone's really taken advantage of that, but it's been something that the Lord's used in a good way. And so I couldn't have just assumed. And I learned this the hard way. I couldn't just assume people knew about my space. I have to tell everybody about it. I have to tell everybody, like, hey, I've got a space, and I keep it simple. Like I've got a studio up on the north side of Oklahoma City, and it's great for headshots. I try to keep it simple. It's great for headshots. I want to get people in there and get to know them. We'll get coffee there or something like that. So that's a good way to put it. But it's never like I'm spending money monthly, and people will just show up. It's not quite the way it works.
It didn't work that way for me either. That's really good. I'm just spending money, people just show up. It's really good, really good. Man, well, let me go back into your story a bit. You mentioned it, and I just don't want to gloss over because I think this is an area that many entrepreneurs struggle in. As it relates to how do I have a successful transition, from the workplace to entrepreneurship, which the opposite question is true as well. How do I have an unsuccessful transition? So you mentioned, man, I think I would have done that differently. So talk to us about that, because I just love us being overcomers, by the word of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. What I mean by that is just walking with the wise and going wise, and of people telling their story. Here's what's worked for me, or here's some things that I didn't get the results that I prefer, and here's what I would do differently. So just Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Man, the term character comes to mind. And this has been an impression on my soul for the last year, is just to be a man of character, a man of virtue, a man of righteousness. Is really how the Bible puts it that way. That's the word that's used most, I think, especially in Proverbs. That Proverbs is poured into my life almost more than anything else as an entrepreneur, and as a business, like starting a business. I realized like starting a physical location. I realized like the Lord's either going to lift this up or it's going to come crashing down. Either way, blessed be the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord for that. And if I could go back and make that transition again, from double full-time to single full-time, I didn't burn bridges. I'll try to put it this way. I didn't burn bridges with my my IT job. I just kind of told them like, I got no choice. I'm leaving, and I think that I think my boss looked at me and was like, man, I wish I go back. I replay this scene over and over in my head of me telling him like, I just don't think I can work here because I'm just like too important with my own other stuff. I didn't say those words, but that's kind of the way I felt. And I think if I could go back, I wish I would just present it far more humbly and just say, hey, like this has been an incredible job and huge opportunity for me to meet people and kind of grow comfortable in this world. And he's a great boss and I had great, coworkers. And I think what I wish I would have done is just more slowly introduce the concept of leaving in the sense of like saying, hey, I just want to keep you in with me on my future vision instead of being like, I'm going to be my own thing. And then just be like one day coming like I scheduled a meeting, came into his office and I was like, hey, I can't work here this summer because I'm too busy type of thing. I wish I could go back and replay that entire conversation. I remember the look in his eyes of just like I think part of that is because they had just spent like thousands of dollars for me to be trained on some new stuff and I just wasn't thinking what would be best for them in certain ways. I wasn't trying to think, again, this goes back, I wasn't trying to think long term. So like I was almost all right, I'm gonna try to tie this in here somehow. I think I wasn't looking for kind of what was best for those around me, even for my own current position. And so if I could go back and change it, I might have tried to have a little more forethought and say, hey, instead of spending $4,000 or $5,000 on me to get trained in this specific thing, what if we spend that on someone else to get trained? Because I might not be here in a few months, and I want to walk through that with you. I've seen that. I'm going to transition for a second, like kind of bring another thought in. When I've moved from one church to another, because we moved parts of the city, my wife and I really wanted that to go well. And the way that we saw that going well was to bring the leadership of our church in, because we were active in our church, like we were leading a kind of a community group, like a home group, and things like that. And we didn't want to just kind of pop up and be like, hey, we're moving, bye. Like we really wanted them to pray through that with us and to walk through that with us and ultimately like check in with us. Like we wanted that. And so we made it a slow transition. I think we took 6 months almost to move between churches. And that was mostly just because we wanted it to, not to be controlled necessarily, but we just wanted to make sure like, hey guys, are we doing the right thing? Like, can you look into us and see if we're doing the right thing? And I've just seen other people leave jobs or leave churches or move to another church just because like, it just felt like the right thing to do. And I'm like, do you have anybody else speaking into this? And maybe I talked to so-and-so and then they said it was great. I was like, okay, one person, like, I don't know if that's really helpful. So it goes back to like the wisdom of many counselors, Proverbs 11, like the wisdom of many counselors helps plans succeed. And so the same thing would go back towards like moving from full-time jobby job to entrepreneurship, like owning my own business is like, man, I really want many counselors to speak into this because I can't see what I can't see. I would love for business owners to walk beside me and say, hey, this might be a good idea. Or, hey, don't do that. Not at this time. Not at this time. So that's what jumps out to me at least.
Man, that is incredible insight. Incredible insight. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I told y'all it's Candid Wisdom here. And we're going to talk about all of it. Man, well, let me transition here. Let me ask you this final question, then we can wrap this up. So one of the things that I think that many people struggle with is figuring out how to be successful in navigating their entrepreneurial journey and their family.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I ask you this question, how do I be unsuccessful at being married and running a business? What
Man,
would you say?
I've been there, and we are still figuring a lot of this out.
Come on.
For sure. But something comes to mind immediately. My early years, kind of going full time for myself, or working a ton at home and not quite having the studio space, meant that I was working at home all day. Going out for a shoot and then coming home and editing and working through all that stuff. And it was great. We had one of our bedrooms was converted to an office for me. I had all my gear stacked everywhere, and it was really helpful because I was very organized. But I was treating my house as, and this is because even before I was married, like, this is what I did. Right? At that point, I was living with a couple other guys, like roommates, and so my bedroom was both my bed and then my workstation, right? And many people will experience that.
Absolutely.
When we got married, we now had more than one room, so I just moved all of that into a separate room. And my wife one day, Ashlyn, just comes to me. She says, "Hey, it's 9 p.m. I think every 15-minute increment you kind of run back to the office and you start working, and that's not helpful. It's actually really hurtful." And so she called it out, and that was so helpful of her just saying, "Hey, it's good that you're working, it's good that you're doing, but you can't turn it off. You just I literally would wake up thinking about stuff and go to sleep thinking about business stuff." And she's like, "You can't turn it off." So I think two things came out of that. One was we agreed, and this was so helpful. One was we agreed to make a 9 to 5 at home, right? That yes, 5 steps from our bedroom door and from the bathroom was my office, right? So it's like I can do everything here, just go to the kitchen for lunch or whatever. 5 steps away was the office. But the most helpful thing was her just saying, "Hey, I need you to be home whenever I'm home." Not like I'm here at 2 o'clock in the other. She's just like, whenever it's time to be home, please be home. Try to disconnect. And it was really hard for me. It actually took a few months of transition mentally. But we talked a lot about it during that time. We talked a lot about it, and she was very gracious. She gave me as much kind of lead as I needed. Sometimes on a Sunday, you're not supposed to be working on Sundays type of deal with a normal job. Like maybe I'd have work on a Sunday. And she's like, "Hey, as long as we talk about it ahead of time, I'll give you as much as you need." And that was so helpful. And then when I set up the studio, that transitioned really well, because whenever I moved out of the house, I was already in the 9 to 5 mindset. And man, I cannot understate this enough. This was so great. When I moved into the studio and I made it, my hours were 9 to 5. That allowed me, that little drive from home to the studio and back allowed me to sort of gear up for the day and then work. And then as I'm driving back, I could wind it down. And by the time I made it home, I wasn't thinking about work anymore. Wow. And that was just this repetition. That came out of repetition and the desire for my wife and for me ultimately, because she really helped instill this. But the desire to be like, "Hey, let's make home and let's make work." And that was so good, man. So early on, I was unsuccessful in the sense of well, my house is also my job. And it's she's like, "Hey, your house is where you need to be home too. Don't forget that." And so we really found that, and we worked through that.
I hope this blessed y'all, because it blessed me. Ben, thank you, man. Thank you for just your heart behind all of that, your transparency, but most importantly, just the wisdom you shared.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, guys, y'all continue to stay tuned for our Building Excellence podcast. We're going to continue having more candid wisdom conversations on how to be unsuccessful. And so some very specific nuggets that we heard from Ben today. You want to be unsuccessful? Don't plan ahead. You want to be unsuccessful? Just wake up one day and tell your boss you're leaving. You want to be unsuccessful? Work all day, every day at home and have no time for your bride. But if you do want to be successful, go ahead and plan ahead. Go ahead and look at the history and allow history to inform you on how you can best be profitable in the future. Talk to your bosses if you're thinking about transition. Bring them along the journey. And love your spouse enough to tell them when you believe that they're working too much. And then love your spouse enough to listen and figure out a good rhythm and routine that'll bless your marriage for forevermore. Thanks again, Ben.
Absolutely.
All right. See you guys later for our next Building Excellence podcast.